Good evening. In this broadcast, the information program time. The second month of Russian troops' presence in Chechnya began today with escalating artillery fire in the center of Grozny. The cannonade in the city, according to the agency France Press, from 8 o'clock in the morning became significantly more intense because the 48-hour ceasefire declared by Moscow had expired, which incidentally had not been observed by either side. According to the press service of the government of Russia, during the last few days, units of federal forces had been delivering reserves and replacements for forces on the front rim and were blockading streets. Through the efforts of the engineering airport detachments, the restoration of the Grozny North Airport is underway, where already the runway strip has been repaired. The center of Grozny today was subjected to significant mortar fire. This was reported by an Inter-Fox correspondent. The targeted mortar fire was launched along the street Lenin in order to sever the access to the presidential palace for new regiments of Chechen insurrectionists. Lenin Street was the only street left which allowed delivery to the presidential palace of reinforcements and food. Russian mortar launching installations are located 300 meters from the presidential palace from the north. Simultaneously, subdivisions of federal forces are attempting to become entrenched in buildings on the right bank of the river Sunja so as to completely blockade the central part of the city and the presidential palace, having surrounded a group of Chechen rebels consisting of a few hundred people. Losses among forces of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, according to the 11th of January, were 394 dead and more than 1,000 injured, Intertas reports. These official figures were revealed today at the parliamentary hearings in the Federative Council of Russia. We just received a report from our special correspondents, Sergei Emilchenko and Alexander Migunov from Chechnya. Today, we did not manage to get into Grozny proper. There, severe fighting is underway. You can hear explosions and crossfire. But the war here in Chechnya today is around and nearby. Federal forces today have been storming Grozny all day in several directions and incessantly along the main road, Rostov-Baku, and connecting routes moving toward the city are convoys with reinforcements, ammunition, and fuel. And here, at the closest access points to Grozny, it's not calm either. A Russian transporter was just shot at after it got lost on Chechen roads. The soldiers managed to drive away on the combat transporting vehicle. The soldiers were detained by not regular Chechen forces, but a self-defense regiment from one of the villages. The insurrection is faithful to the Chechen military command. Residents of Chechnya and Chikaria today are in a state of utmost tension and nervousness because of the futility of the situation in which they found themselves and because they are surrounded by war. Relatives are dying. And to where does one flee from one's native land? Although in the streets of Grozny stubborn clashes are still underway, it's becoming more and more evident that the Dudaev venture is doomed to fail. Recognizing the possibility of imminent defeat are Chechen gunmen as well. If in some this evokes even greater ferociousness, then among others common sense is evoked. Therefore, the army leadership and the Federal Service of Counterintelligence at times are able to fulfill various missions without the use of force or weapons. Acting in this manner, employees of the FSK just yesterday freed 20 military from the Russian army. We were seized on the outskirts of the city. We were just entering Grozny. We lagged behind our convoy somewhat, and they took us. When we stopped, crowds of people crawled out of buildings. We can't express what we felt, because you just don't know what will happen next to you. The Russian military are feeling growing support from the population of Grozny, tired of war and trying to end it immediately. We must work more with the local population. For example, in this region, currently local self-rule has been organized and is helping us to push the gunmen out of their regions. They're not allowing them to settle in these regions and fire at us because they know that a blow in response will follow. Apparently successful was the trip to Grozny of the delegation of the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers of the CIS and parents of military servicemen held hostage. The Chechen side has fulfilled its promise to return captured military personnel under the condition that their parents arrive in the Chechen capital. It's expected that the delegation tomorrow will return to Moscow, Intertas reports. being delivered by Air to Chechnya special designation divisions of the internal forces, known as the Division of Dzerzhinsky. Only volunteers are going. They're all well prepared, armed, and trained. Also, combat technologies being flown in. Units are prepared to act autonomously if needed for a time, torn away from the basic forces, which is important in disarming and liquidating armed gangs, especially in the mountains. The military have experience and often have fulfilled tasks in hot points, and I think that the missions which were assigned to us will be completed. And at this time in Moscow, employees of the main department on organized crime, the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, have seized a large gang composed of Chechen residents who, together with the sub-Moscow gunmen, have been extorting money from many capital businessmen. These Chechen criminal leaders are suspected of several murders as well. Confiscated were TTS pistols with ammunition and false documents. Those who didn't wish to disarm voluntarily on the territory of Chechnya and fled to other parts of Russia, in any case, will be disarmed and exposed. During the existence in the Chechen capital of the hospitals under the Ministry of Healthcare and the medical industry of Russia, 163 injured have been admitted. This regards civilian hospitals. The military hospitals do not report their statistics. Our special correspondent, Natalia Prokofieva, just returned from the Cossack village Znamenskaya, her report on the status of healthcare in Chechnya. I'll quote figures which seem to me are no less terrible than those reflecting combat losses. The indicator of child mortality in Chechnya has reached 120 for every 1,000 born. We in central Russia are horrified by the indicator of between 18 and 20. These are the figures of the head physician in the pediatric hospital in Grozny, Sultan Hadjiev. Last summer in the south of the republic, a cholera epidemic was rampant, stronger than the one in Dagestan. More than 1,000 were infected. How many people died is not even known. And the aid, which this summer was several times offered by the State Committee of Sanitation and Epidemic Control, the government of Chechnya had refused. The hospital in Znamenskaya, the doctor Marina Husieva, thanks to whose efforts the hospital still exists, told us that only in the last few days, through humanitarian aid, some medications began to arrive. Before that, they treated using methods of herbal medicine used in the last century. At the sanitary epidemiological station, we met a group of Stavropolian epidemiologists from the Infectious Disease Institute and specialists from Moscow. It's known that epidemics always follow the tracks of war. This spring, doctors expect a new outburst of cholera in Chechnya. Lice infestation is pervasive, mange, dysentery, hepatitis. There are no medications, agents, or equipment. There is nothing at all. To restore a service which, according to our information today, is not functioning at all and is destroyed. That's why we are here. And yet, what is paramount? First of all, that is the vaccination of the population, the child and adult population, and vaccination against diphtheria. Here we heard information that ostensibly in Grozny the water is poisoned. What do you intend to do about that? Such reports do exist, in fact, and it was reported by the radio station BBC, but I think that these rumors are simply far from the truth. And yet, from Grozny to Mozdok to test water, military sanitary physicians have flown out. As soon as the results are derived from the tests, the program time will acquaint you with them. During the last 24 hours, in the territorial immigration services of regions bordering with the Chechnya Republic, there were 1,444 forced resettlers from the conflict zone who had appealed. Itartas reports that overall, since the beginning of conflict, territorial immigration services have already recorded 104,678 people who forcefully left the place of their permanent residence. 31706, the telephone number of the immigration services for the city of Mozdok. Here they calculated that during 1 month of war, through Mozdok alone, 1,500 refugees have passed through. The telephone rings constantly here. People are looking for information about their relatives, and we're phoned also from other countries of the CIS, the near abroad countries, that is the Baltic region. Did anyone find their relatives? Is there anyone who did? If you speak according to our immigration service files, no one yet has found relatives from those lists which we compiled. Perhaps our report will help to find those lost on roads of war. Listen, these are refugees from Grozny. We are the Semyagine family, an entire family. I came with this group. I'm Marina and my son is Seryoja. My grandchild was left in Novogrozny with her parents. They themselves are from Ivanovna. We're worried. How is our grandchild and her mother and father? Their surname is Lapachkine. We'll stay for now in Mineral Waters, and we want them in Ivanovo to know that Marina is alive. Serezha also is alive. And what's happening with the grandmother, we don't know. I need to take our sister to Stavropol, and we have to return to find our mother and brothers. You've lost everyone? Yes, I just have my sister, that's it, and her father-in-law. And who are you by nationality? A Chechen. Since the 31st of December, I don't understand anyone or anything. I have no idea where they are, where they've disappeared to. We have 3 brothers at home, and they don't know where I am. What's your name? Alek. Your last name? Khadyrov. So, Alek Khadyrov, say that you are alive and well. Yes, I'm alive and well. Maybe they'll see me on television. They don't have television there. Doesn't matter. Someone may see and tell them. Yes, they will tell them, perhaps in 10 years. Today, the business meeting between Boris Yeltsin and a group of heads of the administrations of the subjects of the Russian Federation was held. Participating in the meeting were the heads of administrations of the Kostромskaya, the Moscow, Rostov, Chechynsk areas, and the Stavropol Rim area. As the Presidential Press Service reports, they discussed specifically the question of perfecting a mechanism of interaction between the federal center and the regions. The participants of the meeting called for a legislative provision to divide powers between the federal center and the regions on an equal basis for the republics and for other subjects of the Federation. An exchange of views occurred on the situation in the Chechnya Republic on providing aid to Chechnya to restore constitutional order and restore the republican organs of rule and power. To declare national mourning on all those lives lost in Chechnya, the President Boris Yeltsin was admonished by the supreme clerical leader of the Muslims of Russia and the European CIS countries, the Sheikh Ulisman Talgat Tajikdin. This action could become the first step toward reconciliation, he said today in an interview to Itartas. The White House is attempting to expedite the process of dialogues on Chechnya. I would call them probably preliminary consultations. Today, 2 groups attended simultaneously, representatives of religious confessions and the business representatives of the Chechen diaspora, mostly Muscovites. One must note that the Holy Fathers prepared very thoroughly for these talks. And since they represented the Islam faith, Orthodoxy, Catholicism, Judaism, and the World Baptist Union and the Old Rite Orthodox Church, one may presume that all the statements were coordinated. Foremost, the clergy refuted even the possibility itself of us attributing the Chechen crisis to religious differences. This is a purely political conflict. Many cathedrals already have begun collecting funds for refugees, and the Russian Orthodox Church has suggested an initiative to collect donations from the entire Christian world. At the same time, the representatives of the confessions feel it's not yet too late to sit at the dialogue tables, and therefore one must lean on those who represent the true authority within the republics, and also immediately one must hold consultations with the Chechen clan elders, and only with their aid may one confiscate weapons. It was also proposed to establish a new legal regime for the arrival of foreigners on Russian territories so that certain foreign countries could not set up military camps in Russian mountain areas. In conclusion, the spiritual pastors promised all support for the government in restoring peace. And with God's help, as we all know, one can get out of even a worse failure. The first meeting had barely ended when the representatives of the business faction of the Chechen diaspora arrived. They say that these businessmen have real influence in the republic. Consultations were held behind closed doors, but, however, as we learned, they supported all the planned actions of the government. The businessmen promised to speak in more detail on their positions tomorrow at a press conference. The publishers of the influential German weekly Zeit, among whom is the former Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Helmut Schmidt, submitted the candidacy of the famous Russian human rights advocate Sergei Kovalyov for the Nobel Peace Prize for 1995. As the German press reports, there is information that the Nobel Prize Committee has already officially entered the candidacy of Sergei Kovalyov into the lists for this year. The restoration of the energy networks on the territory of Chechnya will need at least 500 billion rubles. This Itartas was told by the Russian joint stock company Energy Networks of Russia. The movement along the Grozny stretch of the Northern Caucasus Railway was stopped the 6th of September 1994 because of massive thefts of cargo and passenger trains which were en route to Makhachkala, Baku and Tbilisi. In 1994, that which was recorded, because we haven't yet and couldn't record everything then, is around 17 billion rubles, which was stolen from the cargo. Since the beginning of combat in Chechnya, tens of kilometers of railway tracks were destroyed. Overall losses in this connection are almost 200 billion rubles. In December, the federal government has decided to restore the road, and as of today, 17 kilometers are again ready for use. However, work is connected with many problems. Many stretches of the track are mined. Therefore, first, field engineers have to do their work. Only yesterday on the bridge over the Terik River, 45 mines were found. This was told to the journalists at the press conference in the government building by the directors of the Ministry of Transportation of Russia. The restoration of the Grozny stretch already cost 50 billion rubles. The entire Ministry of Transportation budget of 1995 is only 227 billion. It's clear even now that there will be a shortage of money for other repairs on objects in the center of Russia, which could soon begin to disintegrate. The aide of the President of Russia, Alexander Lifshitz, from all predictions, feels the most realistic to be the preliminary calculations of the government that in Chechnya, during the course of 1995, they will have to send 4 or 5 trillion rubles, perhaps even more, although I think that not by much. That means that for this reason, there will be no economic cataclysms in Russia. The expected expenditures could not even exceed tempos of inflation. They can be covered either through redistribution of funds within the budget or through drawing supplementary funds in its revenues, for example, from export tariffs. The real effect on the economy, Alexander Lifshitz said, commenting on the growth of the rate of the dollar, currently is not the events in Chechnya, but inflationary expectations, usual for January, currently aggravated by the belief of certain citizens in catastrophic predictions. In February, however, inflationary tempos will begin to subside. One must also not think that all those who are answering for the economy are only occupied with the conflict in Chechnya. Alexander Lifshitz said that yesterday with Boris Yeltsin, they discussed also serious steps to regulate the securities market, the status of natural monopolies market, and the state companies. In the State Duma, the party of war is prevailing. This was the comment from the deputies of Russia's choice at the Wednesday plenary session of the chamber. At today's press conference, representatives of the faction Russia's Choice accused their parliamentary colleagues of sabotaging efforts to stop the bloodshed in Chechnya. A party of war in the State Duma exists, and that is the faction of Zhirinovsky, all of them except for one person, 80% of the members of the faction of the Communist Party, 82% of the members of the faction the Agrarian Party, the faction of the Democratic Party except for 3 people, the faction of the party Russian Unity and Accord, except for 4 people, yesterday did not permit even the inclusion into the agenda of the session of the Duma the draft law on the immediate termination of combat activities. Hoping to achieve their aims through the aid of voters and political pressure on parliamentarians in the presidential administration, the Russia's Choice faction yet feel that the question of resignation of Boris Yeltsin is not realistic. Impeachment is a problem of political stability in the country. It's not simply a formality. And when the faction decides that, in the interests of political stability in the country, impeachment must be resorted to, then possibly this question will arise. The press service of the government today told our television agency that during the operational search measures, organs of military counterintelligence in the zone of conflict detained an employee of the Lithuanian intelligence services who illegally entered Russia. Sosnovskas Vladimir Ivanovich was in Grozny, posing as a representative of Muslim Baltic organizations. You see him in the investigator's office. During the preliminary inquiry, Sosnovskas gave broad information about foreign mercenaries in Chechnya, Russian citizens cooperating with Dudaev, and also about operations of the Lithuanian Special Services against Russia. Sosnovskas also recognized one of the Lithuanian mercenaries, nicknamed Nick Petersky. The film camera recorded the latter on the roof of a building when he was training gunmen to shoot. Yesterday, the organs of the Federal Service of Counterintelligence took Sosnovskas to Moscow. In the field of view of the organs of Russian counterintelligence, this man was in sight back in 1992 when he was noticed collecting information of military political nature in the Pskov district. An employee of the Lithuanian Special Services during interrogation said that he gave intelligence materials not only to Lithuanian mercenaries but also to regiments of Latvian groups, Ukrainian nationalists and Islamic fundamentalists. My mission here in Grozny was a purely informational mission, the accumulation of information about the activities of the Muslim and Chechen movements and to report to my special service. I received orders to function and to collect this information. The information later was filed, and also there was information on recruits, and recruits were made in Grozny. Lists of diversionary recruits were compiled. And for them, the initial sum was given out, which was divided, and they were located in groups in mountains, cities, and villages. I made contact with the special services, the Dudaev services, so in this way I could serve there for 1 year and received a $1,000 advance and the rest in monthly installations. Before my departure, in the lists there were 30 to 40 people of recruits, and the number of recruits in Grozny by then was around 80. Criminal charges have been filed. An investigation is underway. Today in Petersburg, a criminal gang was arrested which produced and sold explosive devices. Explosions heard these days in Chechnya are echoed in St. Petersburg. The business of blood, the occupation of the criminal gang producing and selling to regions of Russia and to countries of the near abroad various modifications of explosive devices. Equipped with transmitters and receivers, they operated within a radius of 1.5 kilometers. On the blood of our fellow men who are dying in the Northern Caucasus Republic, the 9 criminals earned dollars. Each such device went for 1,500 greens. With the aid of a stolen computer, the newly established businessmen made superior radio-electronic schemes of the explosive devices and the TNT and the more destructive hexagon they extracted from mines and shells which were left in the battlegrounds of the Second World War. One of the members of the criminal gang working in the defense industry stole from the plant detonators, detonating cords, and igniters. So the production of the lethal devices was organized on an industrial basis. In the list of accomplishments of the criminal group, there are armed attacks, murder for hire, and theft. The Petersburg Operations Department feels that they have uncovered only the tip of the iceberg. The Ministry of Finances today has submitted to the State Duma the fine-tuned draft budget for this year. However, there are, as previously, no expenditures indicated connected with the military operation in Chechnya. Meanwhile, the rate of the ruble again has fallen today by 23 points. Oleg Saskovets feels that the creation of a new line of plane Tu-204 is evidence of a partial stabilization of productivity and establishing ties among domestic companies. The new passenger plane, the Tu-204, which the Ulyanovsk Manufacturing Association Aviastar began to produce, is now a serious topic of discussion in the Russian government. The first such plane was planned to be built 2 years ago. However, in the opinion of specialists, its late arrival can still be considered to be a serious indication of success in the competitive battle with Western technology. For example, the chairman of the defense industry, Viktor Glukhich, does not conceal that the plane has problems with its engines, but in the near future those will be resolved because the plane already has received a certificate from the Russian Aviation Register for passenger flights. Of the same opinion is the first vice premier of the Russian government, Oleg Saskovets, who has flown today to Ulyanovsk. It's a competitive machine, and evidently we will be selling it not only in Russia, but offer it for export. Regarding the Chechen crisis, Oleg Saskovets denied accusations in the press that it was he that gave the order for the New Year's Eve storming of Grozny, which ended in failure. Saskovets said that orders are given by military people. His task is to solve economic problems. The restoration of the economy today is a priority goal of the Russian government in that region. As you can understand, in essence, it's absent there in any civilized form. In Tatarstan, a resignation was announced by the Prime Minister Muhammad Sabirov. Lately, he had admitted that in the Cabinet of Ministers of the Republic, they had lost unanimity without which the government cannot function. There were alternative decisions which appeared not always coordinated with the Premier. Georgia, from 1400 hours Moscow time today, no longer is receiving natural gas delivered by Turkmenistan. The Republic cannot liquidate its debt to Ashgabat for the deliveries of that fuel, which is today more than $500 million American dollars. years. Today in Moscow, the trial of the former first deputy commander of the Air Force of the Western Group of Forces, Nikolai Silvestr, came to an end. The military panel of the Supreme Court of Russia pronounced its verdict. The court declined the allegation against the general that he had accepted bribes and abused his official position. At the same time, they found Nikolai Silvestr guilty of acquiring possessions of state property entrusted to his care. The court sentenced the accused to 5 years of conditional imprisonment and payment into the treasury of around 64 million rubles at the rate as of December of last year. During the trial, often the thought was heard that the directives of the Ministry of Defense, which prescribed that military people engage in commercial activities, and complete lack of their preparation for such activity led to intentional and unintentional abuses. The American military inspectors will begin to control the compliance with the agreement on the reduction of strategic aggressive weapons on the Pavlogradsk automobile manufacturing plant in Ukraine. On this day, 50 years ago, our forces began their first major aggression in the new year of 1945. This was the famous Wisla-Odrskaya operation. It began 8 days earlier than what was planned on the request of the English and Americans. 1 month before that, the Hitler forces launched a powerful counterattack in Ardennes, which put the Allies in an extremely difficult situation. It was especially tight for the Americans. For the first time, meeting up with the serious resistance of the Germans, they couldn't endure their pressure and began to retreat and surrender by the thousands. Churchill personally appealed to Stalin with a request to begin a major Russian offensive as soon as possible in order to distract German forces to the east. This request was heard, and on the 12th of January 1945, the forces of the 1st Belarusian and the 1st Ukrainian fronts began to storm enemy positions in the west of Poland. The German defense consisted of 7 well-fortified borders, which were taken only with great losses. 600,000 of our soldiers paid with their lives for the freedom of the much-suffering Polish land. Probably not in a single European country did the Nazis exert such cruelty as here. When the Polish forces for the first time saw what the fascists had done with Warsaw, many of them wept. Soon the entire world would hear the terrible World Offensive. In this concentration camp on the territory of Poland, the Nazis exterminated 4 million people. Our soldiers found alive less than 3,000 emaciated prisoners. Now in Europe, this is remembered only rarely, as incidentally those who freed it from the Brown Plague. Or how else can one explain the fact that in Poland, at certain obelisks and common graves of our soldiers, the monument tablets with the words "Liberators, the brave soldiers of the Red Army," have been replaced by other words, victims of the Second World War. However, for the prisoners of the Offensive camp, they will always remain liberators, and no one is permitted to change this now. Today in Sofia, the first session of the new parliament of Bulgaria opened. At the early elections in December, victory was held by the left forces, the Socialist Party of Bulgaria, the heir of the communists, but in many ways it has rejected the Marxist dogmas and became a party of reformers, received more than half of all the votes of the electorate. Today, the 125 seats of the 240 in Parliament belong to the Socialists and their partners in the pre-election coalition. The leader of the parliamentary majority, the 36-year-old head of the Bulgarian Socialists, Jean Vidinov, and probably the future head of the government, said that the new parliament and administration in the very first days will become occupied with urgent problems of society. The commanders of the army of the Bosnian Serbs, Muslims and Croats signed an agreement on resolving contentious issues in the zone of Mount Igman near Sarajevo. It provides for the final withdrawal of Muslim subdivisions from that mountainous area. As a reciprocal measure, the command of the Bosnian Serbs has promised to deblockade the so-called blue corridors along which humanitarian cargo arrives in Sarajevo. The American Defense Secretary, William Perry, expressed the need to broaden the American-Indian cooperation in conducting peacekeeping operations of the UN. He spoke about this immediately upon his arrival on an official visit to the Indian capital and after a meeting with the Minister of Defense of India. According to the head of the American Defense Department, with the end of the period of Cold War, a new era has begun in mutual relations between India and the United States. Armed clashes in the south of Lebanon are acquiring a more severe character. They are conducted between gunmen of the Islamic resistance movement on one side and the Israeli forces and their allies from the Army of Southern Lebanon on the other. In response to constant attacks in the security zone, the Israeli army has assumed a new tactic in fighting. Its essence is combining partisan methods with massive aviation attacks on the Hezbollah bases in the depth of Lebanon. As a witness, I may confirm that as a result of such actions, most frequently peaceful residents die. I'll remind you, a safe zone is 1,207 square kilometers of Lebanese land occupied by Israel since 1978. The resistance in the south of Lebanon, said the chairman of the parliament of that country, Nabi Berri, is a trump card for us, and it will be kept until such time that resolution number 425 of the UN Security Council is complied with. This resolution provides for an unconditional withdrawal of Israeli forces from all Lebanese territory. It's noteworthy that the armed clashes in the south of Lebanon have increased during the visit to the region of the American Defense Secretary William Perry. In this connection, the Lebanese want to direct the world public opinion to the fact that American weapons in the most moral manner is being used against the peaceful population. Israelis, meanwhile, justify the military activity by the armed outbursts of the Hezbollah army. No matter what, such actions can lead to the most serious complications, not only in the present but in the future. They undermine international efforts directed at resolving the Middle Eastern crisis as soon as possible. The investigation continues in the corruption charges against certain former high-ranking French government officials. The largest number of allegations has fallen on the former Minister of Trade, Longuet, as observers feel he is only a few steps away from imprisonment. He is accused of receiving a suburban estate as a gift and also a mysterious amount of money in order to finance his own party. In Great Britain, the persecution campaign against the Russian journalist, our personal correspondent Alexander Malikov, is gaining speed. He's accused of espionage activity. The Malikov case was on the headlines of almost all British newspapers. But in none of them is there any concrete accusation against him, apart from general phrases of the danger which he presents for national interests. The press singles out only various fantastic versions, citing the English Special Services. One of the newspapers, The Guardian, gave our correspondent an opportunity to respond to all this speculation, and also Channel 4 of national television, ITN, gave him that opportunity. In his special report, the anchorman of the company, Jon Snow, presents the hero of the day to their viewers. This is the one accused of espionage, Alexander Malikov, who reports from London for the television company Ostankino. He's 43 years old and he's married. Here he has been working since 1990. And then the anchorman says that on the 4th of January, Malikov received a letter from the Immigration Services, which in essence is a letter from the Minister of Internal Affairs of Great Britain, Howard. In the letter, he's accused of being an acting officer of the Service of Foreign Intelligence. He's offered to leave the country within 1 month, but at the same time, satisfaction is expressed with his 4 years of work as a correspondent. To the question of the anchorman, why did this choice fall on you, Malikov answers, I'm an accidental victim of someone's intrigues. Possibly someone needs this. There's an impression that the fox hunt is over and the witch hunt has begun. Well, there's no other explanation to all of this. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other organizations are undertaking all efforts currently to defend the rights of the journalist and remove the unjust accusation. Today in Moscow, the triumphant ceremony of awarding annual journalist prizes was held. Dedicated to the economic rebirth of Russia, the competition of journalistic works, which annually is held by the Russian Trade Industrial Chamber together with the Union of Journalists of the Russian Federation. Today in Moscow, its results were concluded. At the triumphant awards ceremony for the laureates, the cream of the journalist corps of the capital gathered. Awards went also to our colleagues from NTV and the Television of Russia, and the news anchor Arina Sharapova was recognized as the most charming anchor of the year. It's especially pleasant for us that among the best, the Channel 1 Ostankiно employees were named from the studios of the programs of national creativity and also youth and children's programs. Of course, the popular Dmitry Kiselyov and Vlad Listyev were featured, who received several awards immediately. Regarding the awards, apart from honorary diplomas, the journalists were given money prizes and valuable prizes, and the tourist company Moscow Tour gave to the especially distinguished ones tickets for vacations in foreign countries. We must pay in kind to people for their talent, professional mastery, and for their personal valor. In our flow of insane, serious, and unbelievably complicated politics, who would ever have thought to find charm in politics? And I am its representative. The recognized hero and the conqueror of the hearts of Hollywood, Jean-Claude Van Damme, has interrupted a filming session in Hong Kong in order to visit the Russian capital for the first time. As an honorary guest of the international kickboxing tournament, which opens in Moscow, he will hand belts to the winners for the titles of champions of the world, Europe, and Russia. At a press conference, the hero of the films of the bloody sport kickboxing admitted that he does not tire himself any longer with a constant athletic regime. At one time, striving to create a new image of a Superman and intellectual, he possibly will continue his artistic quest. And in the presence of an interesting scenario, apparently Van Damme says he would play in a historical film of Russia. He's most interested in events of the 18th century. And today, the hero of American Tough Men is in a hurry to the Bolshoi Theater to hear the famous Barber of Seville. With this, I bid you farewell, and in a few seconds, the program will be continued with sports with Konstantin Vybernov. Goodbye. Good evening. In 4 days, the Open Australian Tennis Championships will start, but for now, the leading masters of the racket are in dress rehearsals. At the revealing tournament in Adelaide, Evgeny Kafelnikov lost in 2 sets to the Frenchman Guy Forget and is not in the finals of the competitions. In the decisive singles, Forget will play the American Andre Agassi. Only 3 days are left before the finish of the most adventurous race of the world, the Paris-Grenada-Dakar. Leaders are changing, crews are leaving the race, and now you will see the climb of the jeep of the Russian amateur racer Sergei Lisovsky. However, despite the occurrence, the first showman of the country will continue the rivalry and is in 5th place among the diesel jeeps and the 12th in his own class of vehicles. But after today's level, the leader, Victor Moskovsky on the Kamaz and Pearl Artik on the Citroën. Details in our special broadcast at 22:30. After yesterday, it was announced that the regular NHL championships will begin. After all, in America, there's a truly festive mood. We're just so happy that, again, we'll be on the rink. These are the words of the forward of Philadelphia, Eric Lindros. Regarding the agreement between the owners and the players of the teams, one must say that the agreement was concluded for a term of 6 years, and the sides can re-examine it after 1998. Today in Moscow, the first track and field tournament in the season began. The memorial to Vladimir Dyatlov. Of greatest interest were the competitions in the triple jumps. Rivalry was literally by centimeters. Among the men, the best was the Russian Vasily Sokov. Among the women, victory was held by the world record holder, Yolanda Chen. I'm very satisfied with this competition. It was very well organized because I did long jumps here and triple jumps here. I'm satisfied with both results, 6.663 for the long jumps and 14.32 for the first start. It's marvelous. The best soccer player of Russia of 1994, Igor Simotenko, almost became the author of a sensation in the Italian championships. In the match against the champions of the country, Milan, the forward Reggiano scored against Rossi's goal posts and even the score. However, fortune smiled at the hosts. 1 minute before the end of the game, Salisevich brought the Milan team the desired victory. Good evening. On the Kola Peninsula and in the northern regions of European Russia, snows and blizzards have yielded to cold, clear days for a little while. Tomorrow here it will be variably cloudy with some patches of light snow. Temperatures on the Kola Peninsula -7 to 12, in the Arkhangels district and in the Republic of Komi -12 to 17. The countries of the Baltic region, the Leningrad district and the northwestern region will be in a belt of heightened pressure which is spreading from the anticyclone over Western Europe. Therefore here it it will be partly cloudy with some patches of light snow during the day in the Baltic countries, 0-5. In the Leningrad district in the northwestern region, -4 to 9 degrees. In the central and Volgovyatsk area, as previously, it's cloudy with some periods of snow, temperatures of -3 to 8. In the Volgovyatsk region, -8 to 13 degrees. Tomorrow, the weather of the central Chernozem area and along the central Volga and the southern parts of Russia will be defined by an active cyclone which has formed over the equatorial belt of the Mediterranean Sea. The cyclone is shifting from the northeasterly direction and brings with it blizzards and snow. Temperatures 0-5. In the Rostov area and the Krasnodar Rim area, -1 +4. On the Black Sea coast of the Caucasus, +8 to 13 degrees. Here, torrential rains will pass through with possible thunderstorms. Under the influence of that cyclone will be Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova. But here, it will be only patches of snow, temperatures of 0 to -5. In the republics of the Northern Caucasus, as previously, it's cloudy with some isolated patches of rain and wet snow. Temperatures in Dagestan, +2 to 7. In the Chechen Republic and Ingushetia, -1 +4. In the mountains, the danger of snowslides remains. In the republics beyond the Caucasus, it's cloudy but relatively warm weather. In Georgia, Azerbaijan, +8 to 13. In Armenia, +2 to 6 degrees. In St. Petersburg, variably cloudy skies without precipitation. Winds are weak. Temperatures at night, -9 to 11. During the day, -5 to 7 degrees. In the capital, it's cloudy with some temporary periods of snow, which will grow stronger toward evening. Southeasterly winds 5 to 8 meters per second. Temperatures night and day -4 to 6 degrees. This prognosis was compiled by the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. All the best. Goodbye.